Hello, how you going? Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are listening from. So today, do you want to discover, or let's say rediscover your fabulous self? Because you're already fabulous, but you could be going through a bit and you could feel like you're being really weighed down and it feels exhausting. And so what I hear a lot is I feel like I'm losing myself, Helen. I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. I feel like I've lost my identity. Who I was 5 years ago was so much more fun, and I'm not that person anymore. All I do is go to work, do work, come home, do dinner, go to bed, and then I do it all again. Or I get up, I look after kids, I go to my part time job, whatever it is for you. And you feel like you're losing your identity, and to sort of add or put wood on the fire, you feel like you're putting your partner's needs first. Their priorities are more important. You're trying to make them happy, and you do try and set boundaries, but it just almost feels like this uphill battle, like it's this impossible task. Lastly, exhaustion. You're friggin' exhausted. You are so tired of being exhausted. So if any of this sounds familiar, perhaps let me know in the comments, because you are not alone. Imagine a life. So I want you to put on your sort of visionary or your imagination. Have a little bit of a, oh, what is possible? If you are actually able to not live with any of this and to actually really express yourself freely, to be totally who you are with a really strong sense of your own identity, and then be able to indulge in some of your own interests. And look, I get it. If you've got kids, they take a fair bit of time and energy. I know all about that. I'm just trying to move my little thing over. I get that. But how are you meant to rediscover your fabulous self if you don't set boundaries, if you don't prioritize yourself, and if you are so damn exhausted, it all feels like too much? So what I want you to do is just imagine for a moment that this can begin to change. So today, what am I going to be yakking on about today? Today I'm going to be talking about the absolute crucial conversations that need to happen with yourself, but also with your partner. If you are in a relationship, then this will speak to you. But even if you're not in a relationship, it's about the freaking conversations that you have with yourself. Being able to deepen the connection with yourself. And then if you can deepen it with yourself, you're much more likely to be able to deepen it with your partner. And the last part is being able to trust your instincts, trust your inner self, and be able to do that without hesitation. Many of us, including me, grapple with fear. I grappled with fear enormously. I've had anxiety, I've had PTSD the bulk of my life. However, fear, I would have to say I'm so much more comfortable with fear now. In fact, it's almost like a heave-ho. It doesn't stop me like it used to. And what tends to happen when we are struggling to get a strong sense of, well, your own identity and what do I really want, it is fear that stops us. And, the people pleasing, and we can get caught up in resentment. So today I'm going to talk into all of that, and I'm also going to talk about the number one obstacle. This is the essential step that you need if you actually want to rediscover your identity. So I really encourage you to listen through to the end. So let's do mum and dad. I never know what I'm going to bring to these Facebook Lives. I think last week it was Johnny and Sally. Anyway, I don't know what I'm going to name this week. As we're grooving along, I'm sure it'll come to me. So we've got Mr. and Mrs. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. How does that sound? Anyway, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is, he knows he's agitated. He's frustrated. He does huge hours at work because a really strong value in him is to provide for the family. And so he's very driven in that arena in providing for his family, but he's tired, he's exhausted, and he feels like when he goes home, and look, I'm talking very generally, when he goes home and he walks in, it's almost like, oh, here we go again. And what I mean by that is he feels this energy of not good enough. No matter what he does, it's not enough and it's not good enough. And he feels frustrated and aggravated and annoyed and not heard that the biggest thing is not good enough. Can't you see? I'm providing for the family. I mowed the friggin' yards. I put the rubbish out. Is that not enough? So Mr. Smith, I don't know why I'm calling him that, but Mr. Smith is in this cycle. And so he starts losing himself. So Mrs. Smith, the things that she was attracted to, that vigor and that vibrancy, and, he was athletic and he enjoyed life and he was spontaneous, and, well, that's not happening because Mr. Smith is Groundhog Day. He's caught up in all of it. And it almost feels to organise anything for himself is difficult. He is prioritising his partner. He wants her to be happy, but she never seems to be happy. Whatever I do, it's not good enough. And so he's exhausted. So Mr. Smith is not in a great way, and he is not able to actually express himself freely, to be able to have a voice. What we do is when we are under stress, when we're under the pump, we go into our old survival mechanisms. The fight, flight, freeze. You would have heard that before. It's a default. I used to go there all the friggin' time. I've got so much better now at regulating my nervous system and staying in the present and staying calm. Even when stuff's coming at me, I am so better able to. Not all the time, God no, but a lot more of the time. So this Mr. Smith, he's struggling because his survival way of living, the tiger's coming out. The survival, the caveman time, the tiger's coming out, and he's not able to actually articulate that and put that into words. And I'm being very, very general. So that's Mr. Smith. He's losing his identity. He's feeling trapped. He's feeling caged. He's having a shit of a time. Let's go to Mrs. Smith. It's a mirror. She's having a shit of a time as well. She is not able to express her emotions. She isn't able to talk about what she's really feeling. And she's struggling with that. And this resentment that started building up a few years ago is actually getting stronger. And it feels like it's hanging around a lot more. And so Mrs. Smith she's got a bit of resentment. And that resentment can quickly switch to anger. Mr. Smith comes home. Mrs. Smith, in her head, because she's making an assumption he should know, can't he see that dinner needs to be put on? Can't he see that the kids need bathing? Can't he see that there's stuff out on the washing line that needs to be brought in? And he may not do that. And Mrs. Smith, she's got this resentment. It's this low-grade resentment inside of her. And she wants to be able to talk about it. She wants to be able to speak into what it is she's feeling. And she is always putting her partner's needs before herself. She isn't prioritizing herself. And it feels like in trying to set boundaries, it's almost impossible because Mrs. Smith tends to be a bit submissive, bit of a pleaser, and can get walked over. And also, she's exhausted. So can you see a similarity here? It's a bit different, but it's similar. Both Mr. and Mrs. Smith are not getting their needs met. They're feeling alone. They've got resentment. Feelings of not good enough, particularly for Mr. Smith. Mrs. Smith, she's feeling really lonely. And for Mrs. Smith to process is to be able to talk into what she's feeling. But God forbid, Mr. Smith, he can't stand it when she does the freaking emotions. He just doesn't know what to do with them. So I'm painting the picture of what I see. Look, it's not, all these couples are not the same, but I see this a lot. So what do we do with that? What it is both couples are in fear. They're in the fear response. They're in the fight, flight, freeze. You know, when I have a couple working with me, Mr. Smith, you stay in your lane. Mrs. Smith, you stay in your lane. And in the middle is this living, breathing, beautiful relationship. And what do we need to keep a relationship alive? We need passion, lust, common interests. Just you know, this whole energy. That's what we need in a relationship, not Groundhog Day where you have a go at each other because you're not getting your needs met. So it's about going back into each of yourself and bringing it back to yourself. And prioritizing time for yourself. Look, I could yak on about what does that look like. But ultimately, it's being able to begin to fill your own needs up first. Go back to previous videos. I talk a lot about this. And being able to prioritize your own needs, what does that look like? You know, whether you have a morning routine, you get up before the kids, you get up before everybody else. It could be going for a walk. It could be journaling. It could be going to an exercise class. It could be meditating. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's prioritizing your own needs. You can only give from a full cup. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are on friggin' empty. You know, when you're on an aeroplane and, you know, the air hostess will talk about when the oxygen mask comes down and who do you put it on first? You put it on yourself first. It's about filling your own needs first. And when you're prioritizing your partner's needs, okay, what's going on there? Is it your job to make them happy? Is it your job to fix them, rescue them? It is not your job. You know, I use this a lot in sessions. It's about being able to stay in your own business. Oh, I haven't even been looking at who's on board. Hello. There's some beautiful, hello Kim, hello Steph. Oh, I'm so pleased to see you. I often do these lives yakking on my own. So fantastic. Thank you. Hello. Lovely to see you. Oh, where was I? So talking about filling your own needs up first. And when you can do that, you are then going to be able to begin having more of these crucial conversations. Because when you are beginning to talk about particularly a very vulnerable place inside of you, and if it's coming from an empty cup, you're going to be very emotional. Mr. Smith, you're going to shut down. It's too freaking much. Mrs. Smith, you are going to get emotional, which means Mr. Smith is going to disappear. I don't know why I've got them on a Mr. and Mrs. Title, but we'll keep it going on that. The thing is, to be able to have these really deep, honest conversations, it's got to come from a full cup. So begin filling your own cup up first so you can engage in these crucial conversations. And then how do you deepen the connection with your partner? Well, you have to deepen the connection with yourself. You've got to get to know yourself. What makes you tick? What are you passionate about? What's the vision moving forward? What do you value? What are your sabotages? What are your successes? You actually have to know all of that within yourself first. Kim, you're saying you're not yakking on by yourself, loving this conversation. Thank you. So it's deepening the conversation with yourself. How on earth? So what we tend to do, and what I've seen over the last 15 years working in therapy, is you freaking put it all on your partner. But you know what? It is not your partner. You have to have these conversations with yourself first. And to be able to really delve into what is going on for you. When you're looking outside to get your needs met from your partner, so let's take it back. Let's look at Mr. Smith. He's looking out at his partner, Mrs. Smith, to tell him that he is good enough. You are good enough. You're earning great money. You're mowing the yard. You're perhaps helping with dinner. You are good enough. Now, I know this is really basic, but you know what? It's not Mrs. Smith's job to tell him that he is good enough. It is for him to do that himself. And where does this come from? This comes from our patterning way back when we're little. Our sense of worth is dependent on other people. And when you begin working on yourself, don't be reliant on anybody else to tell you what your freaking worth is. I'm so passionate about this. It is your responsibility to fill and give yourself your own worth. Because if you don't, you're going to be at the mercy of everybody else outside of yourself, including your partner. When you are able to stand in your sovereignty and in your worth and know that you are worthy, and it isn't dependent on providing, it isn't dependent on trying to make your husband happy, things will begin to change for you. You will be able to have the honest conversations. It'll come from deep inside of you, right inside that gut. You'll feel it in your heart, just like I'm talking to you. And when it comes from that place, you're not dependent on anybody outside of yourself. It's a totally different ballgame. So then this dance that the couple have that's unhealthy, it'll start to become less. It is a game changer. And so what will begin to happen is your energy will begin to lift. Your vitality will begin to lift because you aren't reliant on anybody outside of yourself for your sense of worth. Now, this is coming from somebody with experience. My sense of self-worth has always been reliant on outside of myself. Always. But it friggin' isn't now. My sense of worth is within myself. And it isn't reliant. And even if I have a wobbly day, and man, I can have wobbly days where I can receive news, I can receive feedback, I can receive some things that make it a bit wobbly. However, in that wobbliness, I've got a tool bag, I've got tools that I use to access, because I used to swing this pendulum. You know, I used to be addicted to adrenaline. I used to be addicted to the highness. And yes, I have got a type A personality, but I also, my inner world, I'd just swing because I'd need my hit. I used to think I was bipolar, and I think we all have that on some degree. But with the high comes the low. And so I have learned, and I'm still learning. Have I got it together? No. But what I have got, and this is where I want to go to next, is the number one, and I really want to word this correctly, the number one obstacle and the essential step that you need to rediscover your identity. And look, I may have already touched into this in all that I've said, but I believe the number one ingredient, element, whatever you want to call it, is self-trust. It's that inward trust that, you know, I got me. And how do you get that? Well, it's not sitting watching Netflix, drinking alcohol, eating food. It's not getting on social media. How do you get that inner trust? It's not by doing. It's by being. It's by stopping. It's about getting out of the head, getting into the body and trusting. This body of yours is incredible. It will give you signs. You know, if you've got nervousness in your gut, well, what's going on there? If you've got this feeling in your chest because there's this dread going home, what's going on there? It's trusting yourself. Your heart, your soul, your body is constantly giving you signs and indications whether you are aligned and living your life from your values, Not your partner's values, not your parents' values, but yours. And that is the key here, is to trust yourself. I've always looked outside of myself, always, and I don't now. And by not trusting myself, I would have to get my answers from outside of myself. And by trusting myself, if we bring it back, by trusting myself, it's so much more peaceful. It's, I know my why. I know why I'm here. I know what I'm doing. And every day I do little steps towards why I'm here. It's your purpose and knowing your values. Let's come back to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because I'm going to have to finish up. What needs to happen for Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Let's go to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith. It's for Mr. Smith to be able to start to heal some of his baggage. It's for Mr. Smith to be able to drop in and start being vulnerable with what he's feeling. It's for Mr. Smith to look at his belief system, his conditioning, his patterning. Because Mr. Smith, it's activating when he's trying and earning and doing all, but she's not happy. I just want my wife to be happy. Mr. Smith has to work on his belief system that, I am good enough. And I don't have to make my partner happy. It's not my job. I can't make her happy. It's for Mr. Smith to be happy in his own skin, in his own lunchbox, in his own body. That's Mr. Smith's job. Then let's go over to Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith is for Mrs. Smith to be able to move that friggin' resentment, because that's not going to serve you. You're going to have tone. You're just going to have an energy. You're going to have an FU energy. It doesn't matter. Mr. Smith might be trying the best that he can, but if you've got resentment, it's going to be really, really hard for him. So Mrs. Smith, let some of your resentment go and begin to really get honest. What do you want? And what are you willing to do to get what you want? And to be able to come in gently, noticing your tone. Are you accusing? Are you judging? Are you attacking? Are you criticizing? Being able to have conversations from a really sovereign place where you aren't attacking. Because Mr. Smith, he's going to friggin' disappear. So, look, I could keep going. I'm going to have to finish up. But when a Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you're in your fight and flight, no good is going to come from that. So it's balancing the nervous system, be able to come back down to calm. And then in time, being able to have these connective, close relationships, to be able to talk honestly from the heart. But of course, that takes time. So the key is trusting your own intuition, trusting your own gut. And the most important relationship you are going to have is the one with yourself. And, that empowerment within yourself. Your power comes from within you, not outside of yourself. Anyway, that's the sermon for today. And I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for those of you who have commented. I really love to see you on these Facebook Lives. And anyway, you enjoy the rest of your day. See you.